They provide you the software, they provide you the access control system. Just know that that is proprietary. A lot of times it's just kind of like a white label. They reskin the material. Maybe they get the hardware somewhere else and they stamp their brand on it. In those scenarios, when you purchase that product, you are tied to that product, which means you are also probably tied to their key fobs or whatever other credentials that they're giving you. That also means that they can increase the price at any point in time. So you got to be careful of that. So if you're like me and you're a gym owner and you've been in a position where you're going, I want to give access to my customers 24/7, the first thing you probably do is type in the search engine 24-hour access control systems or 24-hour access software systems, and you come up with a handful of them. You also probably come up with a list of people like local locksmiths. They typically are distributors of other access control systems, and they can come in and install. And you're left in a predicament, right? Because you either choose a software system that's fully integrated. And if that software system is fully integrated, what does that really mean? And then you can also continue using your current software system that you have for your operations of your gym. And you can go out and have a local locksmith come in and install something that they can just do on site. Here are the challenges that I found out when I was doing this. The first question is, if I go with a software platform that is providing me this all-in-one solution, right? It always seems like a great idea at first, and you usually get sold on this concept because I did too. They come in and what they do is they first give you their software. They say, hey, take my software, and by the way, we have proprietary hardware that's tied to our software, and it's going to be seamless, right? And it usually is seamless. The challenge is you can never leave that software product because they do have their proprietary hardware in place, and you paid a pretty good fee to make sure that you have that hardware in place. So if you ever want to leave, guess what? You're stuck with that software and you're stuck with that hardware, so you really can't, unless you're willing to pay more money to go have the local locksmith install something different. So the other option to that point is having a local locksmith go in and do the install for you. You can keep your current software platform, and you can have the local locksmith come in and install one of their, network provided software access control systems, right? They'll come in and maybe they'll provide HID. They'll provide maybe something like OpenPath or Brivo. And you'll see this, right? They'll come in, they'll do that installation. And I recall when I was working with one of the large franchises that are out there, I'm not going to give a name, but they have a 24-hour access system. And I was curious, like, how does this big franchise with thousands of locations make it 24-hour access? And then there's no true integration with the software that they were using. They were using another big software product name that's out there. Again, I'm not going to name it, but they didn't have any true integration with it. They were using a separate access control system and a separate software system to run their gym. And I remember managers at these gyms, when someone would go in and cancel a membership, they would cancel them on the membership platform software. Then they'd go in and cancel them out of the access control system software. And if someone missed a payment, right, lo and behold, guess what? Someone missed a payment, they still have access to the gym. And you always had these managers that were monitoring payments that were coming through. And if a payment was missed, they would remind themselves that they got to go in and turn off the key fob or the access to that customer, so that way they didn't get access again. That brings up another point. If someone has a key fob, guess what? There's other people probably using that key fob, especially if it's late at night, right? I buy a membership, and guess what opportunity I have? I can share that with my whole family. And if it's not staffed at certain times, nobody's going to notice. So then you got to implement like a tailgating system, right? So now you have this plan to implement a tailgating system, which is additional fee for camera systems to identify that I brought in somebody else, or I gave my key to somebody else. If I just give my key and you don't have a tailgating system with a camera system that's identifying that it's not me, well, my wife or my kids can use it, and it just looks like I worked out like 7 times in one day. Not a big deal. So all of these other problems start presenting themselves when you start digging and continue to dig. And then you're left with, what do I use? how do I get into a position where I'm able to have my membership software system and my platform and my access control system? Now, there's plenty of software tools out there. There's plenty of access control systems out there. And I'm not going to say ours is the best. I think we did a pretty good job because I myself had the problems. So I tried solving for it, which I did. But, for me, the things that I was asking myself, number one, how much is this thing going to cost me? Right. And then are there any additional fees? And then if I'm choosing a platform that has this all-in-one solution, how am I truly locked into them, or can I still use their hardware if I ever want to leave and go to another software platform? So those are the kind of like the first primary questions you start asking yourself. And then you get into some of these secondary questions like, all right, well, now I'm into this. How long is the contract? Now I'm into this. What do I have to pay for the key fobs? Right. If you're doing key fobs. So I'm going to answer some of those questions so you have a little bit more clarity on maybe how to navigate this confusing process, right? So the first one, if you get involved with an all-in-one access control system provider, they provide you the software, they provide you the access control system. Just know that that is proprietary. A lot of times it's just kind of like a white label. They reskin the material. Maybe they get the hardware somewhere else and they stamp their brand on it. In those scenarios, when you purchase that product, you are tied to that product, which means you are also probably tied to their key fobs or whatever other credentials that they're giving you. That also means that they can increase the price at any point in time. So you got to be careful of that. Some of them are really good. Okay. Don't get me wrong. There are some really good products out there. They're very honest about how they do business, and they have no intention of actually trying to, nickel and dime you everywhere. But know that those key fobs, if you go out and buy key fobs today on your own, you're going to pay about $3 a key fob. Okay. Maybe a little less depending on which type of fob you're purchasing and how that RFID access actually works. Now, if you go with a provider, right, that's an all-in-one, they have the opportunity to make a little margin on that, rightly so, right? That's their business model. They're trying to make some money on that as well as the hardware. So they're going to charge you for the hardware. They're going to lock you into potentially an agreement. They're going to have you on their software, and then they're going to charge you for those key fobs that you're going to be purchasing on a regular basis. If they're mobile credentials, they're going to charge you for the mobile credentials as well. If you go out and go to another provider, let's say you go to a local locksmith who is a distributor of a product like Brivo, for example. Brivo is a worldwide known product, and they have a great reputation. If you were to use their product, that local locksmith, a lot of times, because they are the distributor of that product, they're also going to try and sell you key fobs as well. So you're going to be kind of tied into whatever those rates of key fobs are. Now, if you have some technical knowledge about this, what you can do is you can identify the key fob type. You can go out and buy those key fobs on your own at a discounted price, and you can try and code that into, because there's what's called a facility code, which is tied to your door for your access. And you can get the facility code number. And then if you're managing this yourself, a lot of times companies like Brivo will have a separate software portal that you can log into, and you can upload your own key fob credentials. Okay. If you go that route, you can continue using whatever software platform you're on today, and you can continue to use Brivo, and you're going to be stuck in that position, kind of like that franchise group that I told you about, where they have multiple locations and they're running 2 platforms, right? If you want to do that, that's totally up to you, and it's doable. It works. Probably not the most secure method of doing things, and probably not the most efficient. So when I went through this process, I realized, well, I don't want to pay for increased prices on key fobs. I also didn't want to pay for the increased amount of time that myself or my staff would have to go back and forth between 2 different systems and constantly do the process of reconciliation of Johnny is no longer a member, so I got to cancel him out, or Johnny missed his payment, so I got to go ahead and make sure his key fob's deactivated. right? That's very time consuming. And it's just not another system when you're trying to create these automations of this 24-hour access facility. You don't want that manual process because it does slow down the productivity of the other areas in your business, such as marketing, being customer centric and making sure that they're nurtured the right way. So that way they're going, hey, this is the place I want to be. And sales, or working with your team members to really enhance their credentials and their ability to make sure your product, what you're selling, is the best it possibly can be, so you can compete against the people across the street. So in that same line, okay, what I started to focus on was, how do I make these two systems work? So one of the things that we did at BizOps was we looked at two of the top providers. Okay, so Brivo being one of them. So if you do have Brivo and that's a product of yours, okay, we're an integrated partner, which means that we will go in, we'll take our software, directly connect it to Brivo, and those two talk. So if somebody cancels, it happens automatically in BizOps, or somebody cancels in BizOps, it automatically happens in Brivo, where their card is no longer active, and you can reuse or repurpose that card if you have it. If they missed a payment, it automatically deactivates them so they can't get access to the facility. And then if you want to include extra controls like time controls or holiday controls, meaning that you're closed during certain times so nobody's key can access, then those are things that you could implement as well. We also integrate with a company previously known as OpenPath, now called Avigilon, which is owned by Motorola, a pretty large company. And I like them because I think their mobile access, and I think this has a lot to do with the fact that they're part of Motorola, their mobile access credentials are great. You can go online, you can sign up for a membership through our software. As soon as a customer signs up for a membership, ding, they get a little notification on their phone. They can go ahead and set their phone up with access control through the mobile app. And people are actually getting a pretty good return on investment on that, because they invest in the access control system, which is totally automated. It connects seamlessly with BizOps. Set those embed codes into your website. People click on the buttons, buy a membership when you're sleeping, and literally they get access to your facility. What we're seeing is 20 to 30% increase in new member signups, because the access control option, or the purchase option, is available online for access control. So that's one component. But then you start asking yourself, well, what does that mean? If I'm integrated with BizOps, isn't it the same thing as these all-in-one systems? And no, it's not. The reason why it's not is because I personally, okay, because I've been in your shoes where I've owned gyms, and I'm going, all right, well, I don't want to be locked in. I want to have that flexibility. I want to be able to move around if I need to, or if I'm growing and I'm doing something, or there's a software tool or a function or feature that I need. Guess what? You have your access control system, and that's what you need. You can always operate it separately on its own platform, and you can integrate it with BizOps. But if you leave, you already got your system still working. There's no, it can be completely independent, or it can be integrated totally, right? So that was one of the biggest components for me. And we integrate not only with OpenPath, Avigilon, and Brivo, but we also integrate with Passport Technologies, and they've been around for over 20 years, and they're really tightly coupled in the fitness industry, and they do a great job as well. So looking at those, it's kind of like the good, better, best options, at least the way that I look at it from hardware, right? So Passport Technologies, it's good. You don't have to hire anybody to come in and install it. It's an install on your own, a do-it-yourself option. They send you the instructions, you plug it in, hook it up to your door, and hook it up to BizOps, and you're good to go. With Brivo, I think that they do a really good job with the access control key fob credentials. They have a lot of really good options. They also have mobile credentials. I haven't been too keen on it because I think Motorola just does a way better job, and that's with Avigilon. So then you go to Avigilon, and they have a fantastic, really solid network and capability to do either key fob or mobile credentials for the phone, which, like I said, increases that return on investment. And then you start asking yourself, okay, so if we were to do something with BizOps, or we were to go out and use one of those providers that integrate with BizOps, what's the cost for the key fobs? Well, if you go out with a, let's say you go to a local installer and they bring you Brivo, well, you're going to pay the price the local installer is going to charge you for those key fobs. We're going to charge you the rates that we get, the wholesale rates, which is about $3 per key fob. If you're in a position of doing mobile credentials, you're going to pay an additional 15 cents per month per active customer that's using a mobile credential. Okay, so that's kind of how the pricing breaks out. And when you think about this in the industry, in our industry, most customers are staying for about 18 months, right? So that's kind of the average lifetime span of a customer is 18 months. So if you're looking at that and you're going 15 cents, over the course of 18 months, I think it's under $3. I'll just do the math here. Yeah, it's $2.70. So in that scenario, you kind of save a little bit of money. It's not a huge deal, but you're still kind of paying for that key fob in a way. And it has to be taken care of because that's a credential that's constantly being used. There's an API call for it. I don't want to get into all the technical details, but there's service, right, that needs to be done in order to make sure that this mobile credential works. So that's the mobile credentials. But then you jump into, all right, so whether I use an all-in-one platform or I use a separate two different systems, my current software I'm using today, or whatever the local person down the street wanted to come in and provide me, or you use a product like BizOps where you can get with an integrated partner, Brivo, Avigilon, or any of the others that we currently work with, then Passport Technologies, then you're going to be in a position where you go, all right, I've made my choice. What's it going to cost me? I've given you the price, right, on the key fobs. The price typically for these types of systems, it's going to range anywhere from like $2,000 on the low end. Okay. I should say 1,500 on the low end, because with Passport Technologies, they're great. It's like $1,500. They send you the product, you do it yourself. Now, if you go all the way up to the upper tier, the price for the hardware is usually around the same. You're going to, in all the hardware, you're going to spend right around $1,500. The difference is in the labor of having somebody do the install. And the install is a little bit more complex with both Brivo and Avigilon because there's more things that they have to do. More importantly, they're going to take on the onus of something going wrong. And what I mean by that is, if let's say your municipality in your area, right? A lot of times you have local fire department come in, they'll do an analysis on your space and make sure that you're meeting fire codes and that people actually can egress out of the building, right? They can exit with no problem. If there's a fire, they can push on the push bar, your door opens and they can get out. So when you have access control, if you're using like magnetic locks or you're using an electronic lock that's engaging the door and a fire happens and those doors remain locked, okay, and you have no push bar, that's kind of a pretty big fire hazard, because if something happens, right, they're locked into the building. They can't get out. You don't want that to be the situation. So what ends up happening with these local municipalities is they want to make sure that you're up to code when you do an install. And so these installers, right, that's part of their job, is to make sure that you're up to code. So that's sometimes why it's a little bit more expensive, because they're going to come in, they're going to make sure that they're meeting the codes for that local area, but they're also going to make sure that whatever they're doing, that they take the ownership of it, right? If they did something wrong, they are liable. They're protecting you. That's the kind of the insurance behind the whole thing. And that's part of the reason why it costs a little bit more. So you're going to see that increase in price, and in that increase in price, I've seen it up to $7,000 on quotes because of the labor. Okay. They typically land right around $3,000 if you're going with one of those other like good, better, best options, right? The better and the best. If you're landing in that category, you're probably right around $3,000, as long as you're already up to code with your municipality. If you're not, then they're going to charge you a little extra. And the reason why they're going to charge you extra is because they do have to make some adjustments to your door. Let's say you got two doors and you got a mullion in the middle, right? The mullion being that centerpiece. If there's a mullion in the middle, they got a plan for that. Okay. If it's a single door, they got a plan for that. If you don't have a push bar, They got to create one or plan for that. Sometimes they've got to install new doors. Okay, so those are all the things that you got to be conscious of. The next question that I typically get, what if my power goes out? Okay, what happens if my power goes out and I don't have the ability for customers to access the facility? What happens then? In a lot of these situations, there's usually a battery backup, and you'll see this with some of these larger groups, right? They'll make sure that you have a battery backup in place. So power goes out and power goes down. Can my customers continue to access? Yes, they can, as long as the battery backup is there. And then the other one is, well, what if internet goes out, right? Because a lot of this is predicated on internet actually working and that information being sent from BizOps, or that information being sent from what I call their head end unit, right? It's a little kind of central computer hub of information. If you're not using BizOps, you're just using access control, right? They have their own interface to enter in customer information and stuff. So let's say you're just using that. They have their own little network and they need internet. They need some way to communicate that information to their servers. So internet goes out. What happens? I'm signing up a customer on my platform and internet goes out. Well, there's always the option of doing a not a battery backup, but a internet backup. And that would be something like a mobile access interface, right? So getting access to the mobile towers, right? So they might set up like a SIM card or a phone specifically to your internet router as well as a backup to your internet. So power goes out, battery's there. Internet goes out, you've got a SIM card or a network for mobile. So that way that's continuing to go. And that also helps in the instance, right? If you're using BizOps in this instance, and you're trying to sign somebody up and you have both internet and power go out, well, guess what? You can continue signing people up from your mobile network, and it still works for the credentials, right? So nothing changes, right? Nobody knows any different in those scenarios. Hopefully, if power and internet go out, there's nothing serious going on and people are actually able to use your club. I've seen clubs where power and internet's gone out just for whatever weird reason, and obviously they still have an active community and people are wanting to use the club. And as long as they have all those pieces in place, they're good. The other question that typically comes up is, Michael, you mentioned something about like camera systems and you mentioned something about tailgating. How do I prevent people from tailgating? Well, the prevention of tailgating is an additional fee. It's not through us. It's just whatever provider you're using, they'll set up tailgate systems. Those tailgate systems can be pretty simple, from just like a little alarm when somebody's like coming behind you when you're walking in, or the tailgate systems can be elaborate, where there's cameras that actually take pictures of both you and the person tailgating behind you, or the person that's coming in with as a guest. And then in that scenario, you can actually charge the additional person or the customer on file who is actually using the key fob. I personally like the mobile access credentials best, and the reason why I like it is because, if I'm the customer, most likely I'm not going to give my phone out to someone. Right? I need my phone. When I'm in the gym, I use my phone to listen to my music. So pretty unlikely that I'm going to hand my phone to someone and say, here you go, here's my phone, go ahead and use the gym, right? Then the other benefit of having those mobile credentials is, you as the gym owner, let's just say, okay, for whatever weird reason, somebody forgets to bring their key fob. Okay, because you're going to have a situation like this at some point in time, or you've already experienced it, where somebody did download the mobile pass on here so they can go access your gym. And then that's one customer. But then you have the other customer who doesn't download this, right? They're, hey, can I just have a key fob? I like it on my keychain. And so they have the key fob. That's how they access your facility. But then one day they forget their key fob, and it's like 11:30 at night and nobody's staffing the club. And so you can have a sign on your door. Okay. Two options. One, scan the QR code, download the mobile credential and get in. Or two, they could be in a position where they go ahead and just give someone a call, and that someone grants them access remotely. Okay, that's the other beautiful thing, right? They can check on the camera to see that it's actually you, and they can grant you access. So that's another really nice thing on the mobile credentials. And then if you're doing online signups, mobile credential or not, right? If it's a key fob and you're handing these things out when they come to the gym and you have your own process for it. One of the things that I think is really nice that you can do is we have a club doing this now. On their website, they go ahead and request an upload of their ID, right? And this really is great for like 3-day passes or, a 1-day pass or a single time pass, because they go on your site, and if your site's optimized for mobile, you can go on the site, optimize it, right? I can take a picture of my card, upload that, and then since I did that step and my card is there, then I can go ahead and get my ID card, right? Like my driver's license. I can go ahead and then get the mobile credential to go ahead and access the facility, right? So that's how they kind of overcome that security question that maybe some people might be having. Like, how do I make sure my business is secure? How do I make sure that I'm not just letting in anybody and everybody? So the overall, like, those are typically the big questions that I get, right? And for me, it's really, how do you choose the right system based on what your needs are, right? If you're one of the individuals who's gone, I just want an all-in-one system. I know my business is never going to change. I'm a single operator. I'm never going to increase revenue by adding more services. I'm just going to do this one thing. And all-in-one system is probably a good option for you, because you're probably never going to change anything, right? But then you got to rely on the fact that the software tool that you're using is always going to be there, and then they're always going to be upgrading and improving their technology. But if you're the other type of person where you're like, you know what, I'd rather hire someone just to manage credentials like key fobs and mobile access credentials, and I'm okay with me using my one system over here and then my other system over here to monitor who's coming in and who's coming out, that's perfectly great. It works. I've seen it work in a big franchise. But if you're looking for a streamlined process, if you're looking to save a little bit of money, hey, not saying we're the only solution, but we've got a pretty good darn solution on making sure that whole system is set up and it's streamlined, and it's totally yours. Right? If you want to leave us, you can say bye-bye, and you've paid your money and your dues for your entire hardware setup, and you can continue using that hardware setup. Okay. So, to me, that's how you figure out what system's going to be right for yourself. And it's asking all those other questions, right? It's not just going down the street to the local vendor. Always get a couple quotes. I remember the very first time I ever got into building gyms, I realized pretty quickly that I needed more than one quote, right? I was working with a general contractor, and he was helping me through this process. And he said, listen, Michael, if you're going to go out there and get a quote, I recommend getting at least 3 quotes from different companies so you can compare and contrast between what services they're offering and what they're actually going to be giving you for the money. So same thing here. I'd go out, do some research on pricing. If that's the thing that's most important for you, do the research on pricing. But still, I get the quotes anyway, because you're going to be able to do kind of a comparative analysis on what they're actually giving you. And then, the other component about this really is you get all that stuff figured out, and you're trying to figure out, like, how much time does it take to get all this stuff done, right? Because it seems like it's a lot. Like I've talked about this for a little bit now. So with all those things going on, all those thoughts that have to happen, and you kind of putting all this together, the amount of time that it's going to take when you start getting into this is, well, number one, you got to go get quotes. So you go get quotes. For each person that gives you a quote, they're going to want to schedule a day to come out. It's usually not the same day or next day. It's usually going to be, if they're a busy company, which you kind of want to be with somebody who's busy, it's going to be within a week, right? Or 2 weeks. And they're going to come out, they're going to do an analysis on your facility, how many doors you're actually wanting to use for access control. And they're just going to make sure that it is what they expect it is. And they're going to try and find out where your panel is. Okay. What I mean by panel is, a lot of times in facilities, you're going to have a spot where you have like your internet, anything that's electrical, right? Your music, everything that runs the electronics within your facility, you're going to have that somewhere. Sometimes you have it in your manager's office. Sometimes you have it in a back corner of the building in a utility closet. Sometimes you have a dedicated space for it. They're going to want to see how much run they're going to have for wire. They're going to want to check and see how they're mounting this. Is it on brick on the outside? Is it on a metal or aluminum frame? Is it just only inside, right? Are they going you're going to do this on the inside of the building, and you're going to, showcase this information through a window, and then they have to mount it there. So they're going to look at that, identify a cost and price for you, and then they're going to get back. Usually by the time they come out and they actually get you a quote, it usually takes about a week and a half. I mean, that's what I'm seeing. So that's step one. And then they have to order it. A lot of these places, they don't keep those products in-house. Okay. I can tell you Brivo and Avigilon, those are products that are made in the US. So a lot of times those products, even though components may be made overseas, the products, it's kind of like the iPhone, right? If you ever look at it, it's assembled in the US. A lot of the components are made overseas and then it's assembled here. So similar situation, a lot of these hardware products, the components are made overseas, and then all those components come in and it's assembled here in the US. So they'll order directly from the distribution center. That distribution center will send it to the local installer. The local installer will then go ahead and install it. And the reason why they don't keep this stuff on the shelves is because there is kind of like a time limit, right? Every like 2 years, they're upgrading product for these big companies. And so you want to make sure that you're not getting also an old product. If they install it too quickly, okay, let's say they're out there, they're done, and they say, oh, no problem, we got this stuff on the shelves. You're going to want to check it out, because if they've got it on the shelf, is it because it's an old product, right? It's been sitting there forever. It's like the 1990 truck that was sitting in the lot at the dealership, and they just never sold the things. It sat in inventory forever, right? You don't want a product that's been sitting in inventory forever, because it might be outdated and the technology itself might not be as good as something that you're really paying for. Okay, so that's another thing to consider. And then as far as getting everything set up, once they're able to come out, which usually is a 2-week time frame from the time that they actually did the quote, and if you agree to it, once you agree to the quote, you're usually looking at 2 to 3 weeks before they get the product, and they can schedule a time and date to come out there. So in total, right, from the time that you call someone to the time that you actually can get an install is anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. So you should plan for that, especially if you're in the process of either getting into a new facility and building. Okay, that's a 4 to 6 week window. Or if you're just looking to, upgrade and become a 24-hour access facility, and you're already telling your members you're doing this, know that whatever you're telling them, there's usually, there's going to be that 4 to 6 week lead time, sometimes longer depending on the situation. So know those things up front, because if you do, it's going to be a lot simpler for you as you kind of go through this maze. Really appreciate you listening. And if you have any questions, you can always reach me. Thanks.